everyone. Sarah, and I work on governance programs at NDI. Thanks for asking us to give a quick introduction of this project. I just would encourage you to think about applications to all your disciplines as I go through these slides. In the last few years, we've found that civil society groups around the world have been finding cool ways to use technology to strengthen how citizens engage parliaments. These are pioneering civic hackers who develop technologies that help citizens to understand complex policy issues, reduce barriers to their participation, and just are working to help improve how parliaments function and how accountable and representative they are. So groups like the Sunlight Foundation develop tools to organize and visualize congressional data in interesting and useful ways, as John highlighted in his talk yesterday. Others like Parliament Watch, I don't know if some of you are aware of that group, out of Germany, help citizens engage MPs in real and meaningful dialogue online. Just by way of context, about 2 years ago, the Sunlight Foundation, the Latin American Network for Legislative Transparency, and NDI, with the generous support of the UMIDR Network and Open Society Foundations, gathered what we started calling Parliamentary Monitoring Organizations, or PMOs, from 38 countries in DC. At that meeting, these leaders put together a declaration on parliamentary openness that served as a basis for dialogue between these groups and parliaments. Sorry, just one second. It's essentially a call on parliaments to deliver on their commitments to transparency. It's been a great entry point to begin dialogue with legislative institutions on norms around openness and transparency and citizen participation, and of course to get the parliamentary data that they play around with and use. Today it has support from 114 organizations in 73 countries. It's available in 13 languages. We hope to build on this momentum and expand regional networking initiatives in the future. These are some next steps. So I just wanted to give a quick sampling of some of the tech applications and then have John jump in with his thoughts. So first, you have something very straightforward. I'm sure you guys have all seen something like this. It's a typical MP monitoring website. This one's run by My Society, a UK-based group run by Tom Steinberg, whom many of you may know. Just an effective way to figure out what your MP's up to. This site is used by hundreds and thousands of users each month. This is Parliament Watch, a platform that allows German citizens to directly pose questions to their elected local and federal representatives. It receives I think around 300,000 unique visitors each month, and because of its popularity, the elected officials are pretty much forced to answer the questions from their constituents. So most of them keep a basic profile on their site. I read an article that was published last year that said about 95% of the members of Parliament participate. We talked a little bit just now in this workshop about creating artificial scarcity. One of the great things about tools like this is that it's really created a more structured environment for citizens to communicate with their elected officials, which incentivizes institutions and leaders to directly engage with their citizens. Parliament Watch moderates citizen questions according to a strict code of conduct, so that's one strategy for how they've been able to deal with that. Figuring out how a law changes over time can be very difficult. This visualization shows a version history of Germany's political party law. Just one application of how a tool like this can help a citizen understand changes to a law in a more practical and logical way, although it is so the developer hand scraped past versions of this one law going back to 1967 and visualized it. So each column represents a different version of the law, and the boxes represent the individual paragraphs. Anything that's been changed or deleted is highlighted. This is Lobby Plag. It's pronounced. It's a crowdsourced platform that lets you compare a sample of lobby documents that lobbyists push around with draft amendments. So it highlights any text or added words that are copied and pasted directly from lobby documents. This was put together by journalists and developers who were interested in data protection legislation in the EU. And this last one, we have something like this, or different versions of this in the United States. This is Powerpedia, an editorialized and crowdsourced database out of Chile that highlights links among the country's elite. So it illustrates connections between different people, companies, and institutions, shedding light on conflicts of interests that may exist. So this is just a quick overview. I hope it sparks some ideas about how we design communication tools to strengthen citizen engagement and the engagement of key stakeholders and some of the problems that I think the last workshops touched on. John, did you have any updated insights or feedback that you wanted to share?
So we're really excited about where this project has gotten in a relatively short time. To have it was 113. I get emails every day. We're almost every day where new groups are signing on to it. It's really all over the world where groups are endorsing the declaration. And I feel like the place we're at now with this project is that we have what's to me a really exciting network of groups that work on parliamentary openness all over the world. And the question is, what do we do with it next? And so I just want to share quickly a couple of the assumptions behind the project and see if that makes sense to everyone or if you have suggestions about those ideas. The assumptions are, first, that parliaments are an appropriate locus for democratic reform work, that in a sense they're the most democratic, they're the most deliberative, and the most open bodies of government. And so if we're going to try to change how governments work, it makes sense for that to operate through parliamentary reform questions, whether it's about having the parliament be open or the kinds of laws that parliaments pass. The second one is that this is a normative project. This is not, here's the standard that you have to live up to, although we may do some evaluation and monitoring work. This is about building a consensus about how the world should function and about what parliaments should look like. And so in my mind, this falls in the category of trying to grow cultural expectations into something that's more powerful than it was before. So it's normative is the second one. And the third assumption is that as a result of that, and this is what we haven't quite gotten to yet, but we hope to, is that there's a rising potential for internationally coordinated advocacy, that often democratic reform work happens at a national or subnational level, probably for a variety of reasons. I think that's one of the reasons that the Open Government Partnership has grown quickly, is that it filled this need for governments and civil society groups to cooperate across national contexts. But democratic reform questions don't make sense to focus on simply within national boundaries. It doesn't have to be just a response to a political scandal or to the corruption concerns of an individual country, although it will inevitably be grounded in the cultural or historical circumstance of a place. So what we're really trying to experiment with now is that if there's a FOI effort going on, Brazil just passed theirs, but in another country, or an effort to get data released about bills in Mexico, or a new way to enforce statement of assets disclosures in Russia, then how can groups from around the world insert themselves into that process in an appropriate way? How does world consensus or global consensus around governance reform get represented on a national level? And so that's really the question that we're facing is when is that appropriate and how do we design it to function? Because we have this incredible group of organizations around the world that are at the front lines of monitoring political finance and designing new ways of interacting with government to create citizen engagement, to have distributed monitoring projects, to build websites where you can look up votes on your phone. A lot of this is obviously being driven by new technologies. So that's the question that we have. We have this, this group that has arrived at a consensus about how the world should work. And so what can we do with it?